Good afternoon, everyone. This is Story Talks. I'm Sherry Story, and I'm a Suffolk Public School Board member, and I represent the Chuckatuck Borough. I've initiated Story Talks to interview and have conversations with people who have a real interest or a concern or expertise in various areas of education. As a lifelong educator, I continue to be fully invested in the success of our public school students. Today, I've invited Wendy Hosick. She's from my borough, and I've invited her to come and have a conversation. Let me tell you something about Wendy. Wendy Hosick is a retired director of external affairs for communities and schools of Virginia. She was responsible for legislative affairs, board recruitment and development, and fundraising. She served a 20-year career with Virginia Blood Services in Richmond, serving in multiple market-related capacities, with her last position as executive director and founder of its 501c3 foundation. Currently, Wendy is chairman of the board for Community and Schools of Hampton. She serves on the board of the Rotary Club of North Suffolk and is its past president, and serves on the board of the Cedar Point Association. She was a board member of the Greater Richmond Chamber of Commerce, Henrico Business Council Chair, Western Henrico and Churchland Rotary Clubs, Virginia Association of Fundraising Executives, and the Riverside School. Wendy now resides in Suffolk, Virginia with her husband, Bob, of 41 years, and her brother, Bill, and I'm very happy to have her as one of my constituents. So Wendy, thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with me. I would love you to just start telling my audience who Communities and Schools is and what great services you offer to our public schools. Please share with us, Wendy.
Well, thank you, Sherry. It's always a pleasure to speak about communities and schools because it's so near and dear to my heart, having worked there for 10 years and now chairing Communities and Schools of Hampton Roads Board. But Communities and Schools of Hampton Roads is part of the largest dropout prevention organization in the United States. It has a model that has what we refer to as a site coordinator. That's a person in a school that provides wraparound services to students in need. And it can range anywhere from getting a child glasses because they can't read the blackboard, to getting them dental work, or if they need psychological help, we can provide that. And all of these services are brought into the school, and we track and measure the outcomes of every student we serve for their behavior, their academics, and their ascension into the next grade level. And I'm happy to say, and very proud to say, that this model, when implemented with fidelity, i.e. K through 12, and it's important to make sure that none of those grades are skipped. When we have someone in each one of those schools, we can guarantee a school superintendent an increase in their on-time graduation rates and a decrease in their dropout rates. Right now, nationwide, over 98% of the students that we case manage and track are graduating on time and otherwise would have dropped out.
Well, Wendy, I met you when I first learned about Community and Schools at Elephants Fork High School. Yeah. And that's where I learned about it. At that time, 2 years ago, we had one of your participants, one of your leaders in our schools in Elephants Fork. And she gave her report, and at the end of the year, it was so impressive. I mean, what I heard and what she was able, she might have managed 50 to 60 children, and with all diverse needs, meeting their needs, and her data and success story was amazing. Yes. And I heard kids say, I don't want to go on to middle school because I don't want to lose this support person I have. And I thought that was amazing. And so now I'm very happy to say that I really fought hard to have those kids continue and have another Community and Schools at our Kings Fork Middle which is where our Elephant Fork students go to next. And so we now have one of your gals at Kings Fork Middle, and we have another teacher support person at Elephants Fork. And I can see that the importance of the continuance, and I want to keep up with that. And I would love to have community in schools at more of our schools.
Well, thank you, Sherry. We know that it works. It's not inexpensive to provide this service. And kudos to Suffolk Public Schools, because you do help us with that cost. You've built some of those expenses into your budget. And the more that we can have our school districts do that, then the better our outcomes can be, because we can make sure that we are providing all those necessary services. And right now, all educators are overwhelmed with, we won't even talk about the coronavirus, but pre-coronavirus.
Right.
Yeah, pre-coronavirus, dealing with all of the issues of the students, and you have really top of the line students in the same classroom with students that are middle of the road, and the B student, and then you have them in the same classroom with the C and D student. And they have to be all things to all people. So they can't be concerned about or do something about, because they are concerned about it, but they can't do something about getting those wraparound services that kids need to have so they can learn, and that allow the teachers to teach. Certainly the principals don't have time to do that, nor do the guidance counselors. And we can say that we're doing wonderful things with thousands of students. And this year we're case managing, even during the coronavirus, 944 students.
Wow.
We meet with monthly.
That's amazing.
Yes. But it's critical for our teachers to be able to have that ability to do what they're hired to do, and that is to teach.
That's true. That's true. And I saw that at Elephants Fork, where the teachers were so happy to have this site coordinator there from community and schools to be working with all those, you call them wrap around. I almost want to call them the in-between kind of things, right? Things that students need to support their ability to focus in the classroom. Because if they have just what we might consider obvious is not obvious in every family and every situation. And when they're concerned about these little things, then they can't focus in the classroom on learning. And so I saw that site coordinator meeting those needs. And to me, that was so comforting to know that there were outside organizations in the community willing to come into the schools and help our educators out that way. So I hope that Suffolk Public Schools will continue to grow. I feel that compared to what I know, they are your employees, what you provide, you're a nonprofit, and what you provide through fundraising and so on, I think it's a deal of the century. I don't think we, yes, we do support with some funding, but it's quite a deal. And I'm really appreciative of all the time and effort you put in to make communities and schools work. I asked you initially to talk a little bit about boards. You've certainly been on many, many boards. You've been chairman of boards. You've recruited for boards. So I'd like to start out and ask you, what do you look for when you recruit members to a board? Can you talk about that a little?
I'd love to, thank you. Well, first of all, the board chair sits down with its executive committee and often a board recruitment committee to determine what it is they're in need of. Every nonprofit needs to have people on their board who can give money and get money. And we at Communities and Schools, we have 100% board participation in our giving. And we have no minimum of what someone needs, because we need a lot of different skill sets. We know we develop a board matrix. We know that we need to have our board reflect the community it serves. So diversity in many different fashions is important. And I would say, from what I know about all the national affiliates of communities and schools, and we're in 26 states in the District of Columbia, Communities and Schools of Hampton Roads has one of the most diverse boards in the nation. Wow. And managing that board is not an easy task, but there are things you need to do when you have a diverse board, because we're all looking at life differently. And everybody who's been in the corporate world know that committees began years ago, and committees are comprised of people from different walks of life or acumen, so that you can come up with a better decision. A board of a nonprofit or any organization is no different. Diversity is essential because we live in a global world now. Yes. And Suffolk for many years was just a farming county. It wasn't a city. Well, today we have a huge technology corridor that is growing every day. We have older people, we have younger people, we have multinationals, and we all look at life differently. So it's important for us to be able to get the kind of board member, and it may be someone, for instance, if you're developing a strategic plan, it would be real handy to have someone on your board who has significant strategic planning experience and really likes it.
Right.
I think about a former superintendent of both Hampton and Newport News schools, and who, by the name of Dr. Marcus Newsom, who was on the Communities and Schools of Virginia board, and he loves strategic planning. So he was a critical piece to our moving forward in that arena. Right now, Communities and Schools of Hampton Roads, we're looking for people who are involved in the corporate world on a lot of different levels, but have a real passion for kids, and who can help open some doors for us to get the word out. A, we're here, and B, we have a program that works. And these are future employees of these corporations. And we know that if we can get kids graduated from school and going on to their next level of education, whether it's the military, trade school, four-year school, any of these things, or the job arena, then they're going to be making better employees. They're going to become taxpayers for Virginia. And so that's what we want our board to be focusing on. Everybody wants a board who's able to have vision for the future. Because in this age of technology, our lives change so fast. That's why we're meeting via Zoom versus being in person.
Right.
Everybody else is. So we need to be able to adapt and have people who are adept at helping us do that and inspecting what we expect and what our consumers expect.
Right. So our consumers for the school board are both our students and parents, and our board being elected is a little different. But I do think it's important. Sometimes I know, and might have been something in the past, that the best boards are made up of all educators. But now in of which I'm one, but in the 21st century, and you mentioned global, and we have global students. I can see the advantage of having people. Yes, we need educators on the board, and I think some boards are made up with no educators, and I don't think that is good either. But a diverse board that has representatives from people in the community that represent business and who, like you said, we're educating future employees. And so they bring a perspective to the board. And, you know, some of these diverse backgrounds would be also nice to have on every board, to have it diverse.
Yes.
And as I was reading, it seemed like in the 90s, there was a swing towards very homogeneous boards. But now it's coming back to realize, I think, especially with our global world, the World Wide Web, the internet, that our community is not, as you mentioned, homogeneous at all. Yes. And I think diverse boards, and of course, just being from different boroughs, that brings diversity as well. But I can see the advantages of having a diverse board as well, just from our backgrounds and how that would help any board. So it's been interesting to read about the diversity of both professional diversity, social diversity, of how that can really enhance whomever the board is serving, and you know, who the board is trying to, whatever organization they are trying to make the best of the best. And so it's a little harder with elections. That is not, you know, we always need people to run, and that sometimes in this day and age, it's a hard thing to get people to run for any office, right? Any office. I know last election we had a lot that were uncontested. But it's really important in our society, our democracy, that we have people who are willing to step up and say, well, I could do that for 4 years. And, you know, I have an interest in that. And I think that's even serving on nonprofit boards when people are asked. I think you're looking for people who, you know, are saying, yeah, I would really like to do that and serve whatever organization they're serving. How do you see that diversity can bring maybe some challenges to a board? How do you see that?
Oh, well, diversity always brings conflict because just different cultures look at things differently.
Right.
And one of the ways that you can manage that is if you have some folks that are particularly sensitive to certain issues, is for a board chair, and it gives the board chair more responsibility, there's no question. But it's critical for the board chair to be able to identify how their board is going to respond to various and sundry situations. And in doing so, meeting with those individuals prior to the board meeting to review what's going to be discussed, gain some of their input, and then ask them if they would respond to some key questions that will be asked of them during that board meeting.
Interesting.
And it is we all want to be needed. We don't want to spend our time with any organization or anything that we don't see the value in. We need to feel good about what we're doing at whatever level it is. You could be a surgeon, or you could be someone who's maintaining the school's floors and their windows and their school rooms, and have as important input as the other based on what it is that's being discussed. So you want to ask that person or persons for their input during that meeting. And it's amazing how much smoother the board meeting goes and how that person will respond in future board meetings.
That's good. I know that being on a board, the first definition of the role of a board is governance.
Yes.
And I would like to hear from your perspective. You have been involved in training board members. What does governance look like to you, to be effective governance?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to understand A, what the mission is of the organization that you've been asked to be part of.
Mhm,
B, what your fiduciary responsibility is.
mhm.
C, does this organization have bylaws? It sure better. And know what those bylaws say. They're they're great sleeping material, because there's why. But boards need to have regular updates uh, regarding the bylaws.
Mhm.
For instance, term limits. I think it's in all industries now. Term limits are really critical. The best boards traditionally now have a 3-year term limit, or in an elected situation now you have a 4-year limit. But but you can be reelected.
Mhm.
With private boards, it's a little different. You have a 3-year term limit, typically with 1 term renewable,
Mhm.
and you're asked, you just don't say, oh, well, I want to do this for another 3 years. And then it's up to the executive director or whomever that person is responsible for the organization to say, Mrs. Hosick, we really appreciate all the work you've done in the last 3 years. We're changing our course and we're going to be doing this, this, and this. Do you really see that that's a fit for you? That is, if you think that person really doesn't need to serve another 3 years. So you're asking the person to leave, but you're not asking them because you don't think they've done a good job. You're asking them because the organization is changing and maybe Mrs. Hosick isn't the best fit for that board.
That's really very an executive director who can do that and takes grace. And I like how you put it, that it doesn't mean they haven't done a great job in the past, just but that the direction is changing. And I think that's you handled that with grace. I'm impressed. I haven't ever had to do that.
I've done this before.
You've done a few times. I can see you've been on a lot of boards.
It's a critical piece to having a strong board, and it's a critical piece to maintaining someone's dignity. They've given 4 years to your organization, and there are things that they have contributed, and you want to recognize those good things.
Yes.
And most often, when you've already identified that Mrs. Hosick probably isn't going to be a good fit, Mrs. Hosick is really pleased to have the work for her and
Sure.
untie those strings so
Right.
that you can back off and say, I did what I was supposed to do. I'm glad I did it, and let somebody else carry the baton now.
Right. So you mentioned there's a financial piece and there is an oversight piece.
Oh, there certainly is.
There is.
Now, the executive committee of just about every board out there is really the key group that is responsible for overseeing the financials. Usually the treasurer serves on this, the secretary serves on this, the chairman serves on this, and the executive director, or whatever you call that person, it's maybe a CEO, it could be any number of names, is an ex officio of this committee, which means they cannot vote. And this group, typically on a monthly or every other month basis, meets to talk about all the critical things that make an organization work. Everything from looking at those financials and questioning everything to saying, this number just doesn't make sense to me. And I've done this before. And we have an auditor, and we can always ask the auditor for assistance in something like that. And I think that certainly public governing bodies like your school board has an auditor that is a great reference for that committee. And so that committee then can really pick apart pieces of, or critical pieces of the organization that might need a little tweaking, so that by the time the general board gets it, the tough work has been done. And there are typically fewer questions by the general board, but that committee is well educated to respond to the questions that are being asked.
Yeah, yes. We have two types of committees. We have standing committees that are made up of the board, and then we have citizen advisory committees. And who are to report to us and to be looking at specific sections of the school district.
Yes.
And I think that I'm hoping while I serve on the board that both of these types of committees become a little more important to our board, and that we see that as our board, which has 4 new members as of a year ago, 4 out of 7. Good. And so I hope that we can see this as a core value. It is for me that our committees are very active and engaged in asking questions and bringing things to the school board, and really taking the kind of active role so that it looks like and is for real having oversight. Because if the committees don't function, or they're not functioning how the board, how even the state code says, then it's just a missing piece, and we're missing out on information, maybe good information we can celebrate, maybe information that's missing. And I believe that the better our school board functions as a whole, and all of its committees, the better our school district will be. Like any company, the better your board is, the better the company. The better the school board is, the better our Suffolk Public Schools will be.
Right, and it just takes constant communication of the board speaking with its constituents and your advisory committee, just like what you're doing now, so that they're better informed and you're getting the feedback from them. And I mean, after all, it's the taxpayers who allow our schools to happen.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. At every level, right? At every level.
That's right.
It is the taxpayer.
Right. Well, while you and I are both retired, we still have bosses now.
We do.
And your bosses are the taxpayers, and my bosses right now with communities and schools are our contributors.
Yes.
So it's no different.
It isn't.
It's good to have people who are looking at what we're doing and are offering that information freely. The more transparent we are, the better we are. And integrity is all we have as human beings and as organizations. Without the integrity, we have nothing.
I agree. Yeah. I think you've been an inspiration to me since I've gotten to know you. I really appreciate every little bit of info that you drop into me, into my heart. And I just see that you've had a fantastic career serving people. I learned more about you today, and you've helped me grow today as a board member. And I appreciate that so very, very much. Our Suffolk City is filled with talented people, so many people that have so many gifts to offer. And it's really a fantastic city as it has grown. And I hope that the Suffolk Public Schools can benefit from having all this diversity, all these gifts. I hope we can bring people on board, that our stakeholders become more and more important to us. And I thank you for the work you've done with community and schools and partnering with Suffolk. I am just thrilled that you would have this conversation with me today. Thank you, Wendy, so much.
Well, thank you, Sherry, for asking me.
Thanks, and I'm glad
you and the board are doing to make our schools better, because we're a growing city.
We are.
And with the growth, we need those schools and the good teachers to support them.
We do. We absolutely do. So thank you so much. Thanks for being with me today. And I wish you a very good rest of the day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.